Mayor, you may proceed.
Thank you, Max. Good morning, everybody. It is Friday, February 18th, 2022. This is a special budget meeting of the Commissioners of the City of Rehoboth Beach being held virtually out of an abundance of caution because of the pandemic. I'd like to welcome everybody here. We're going to start off with a call to order at 9:00 a.m. I'll do roll call individually. Commissioner Tony Sharp.
Here.
Commissioner Susan Gay.
Here.
Commissioner Patrick Gossett.
Here.
Commissioner Ed Stranowski.
Here.
Commissioner Jay Legree.
Here.
Commissioner Tim Bennett.
Here.
And I'm Mayor Stan Mills. We have a full complement of the mayor and commissioners. We have a quorum and we are able to formally conduct business today. I'd like to also identify staff members that help support run this meeting, and also those that are participating with us today. And that is Max Hamby and Brant McCormick of the IT department, Ann Womack, City Secretary, Evan Miller, Matt Janis, Kevin Williams, and Sharon Lynn, staff members. Welcome to them for participating with us today. I'd like to thank all those that are watching virtually. And I normally would thank those that are pre-registered to speak. However, there is nobody pre-registered to speak today. The support documents that are available to us are embedded in the agenda. If you go to the city website, look at the city portal, pull up the agenda for today's meeting, you'll be able to see the support documents that we see, and which includes the capital budget presentation, etc. With that, based on our itinerary and originally issued January 13th, our focus today is to be on the 5-year capital improvement program. The second focus would be a follow-up with any department heads. I don't know that happened or was requested, but regardless, we'll turn it over to City Manager Sharon Lynn.
Thank you, Mayor, and good morning, Commissioners. We will start with the FY23 capital budget items. Before that, just want to touch upon briefly what you have in your updated version of the budget, or the changes that were made last time concerning the contributions. So we increased those contributions accordingly. The library increased to $75,000. The fire department increased to $150,000, and the increase to the Historical Society contribution at $37,500. As we get into the budget next, you'll see that we removed $10,000 from the engineering line item in building and grounds, and the projected column was updated according to the finance director, Mr. Dukes. There is a $250,000 encumbrance from the current this current fiscal year budget for the Delaware Avenue restrooms, and we'll explain that in the CIP as we get into that. Actually, the CIP, we're going to start with the comfort stations, and Mr. Miller can share his screen, and we can take it from there.
Sharon, would you like questions as we go rather than wait till the end?
Sure, we can certainly take questions as we go. That might be a little easier.
Thank you.
Sure. So we'll start with the restrooms. You've seen most of these before when we went through the public works portion of the budget presentations, but just to retouch, first one is the Baltimore Avenue design in this current upcoming fiscal year, and that would be the design for the new beach patrol and restroom complex at Baltimore Avenue. I think we put 181, well, you have the budget in front of you, 181,000. The next one that the
Kevin, can I interrupt you a minute? I just want to make sure we emphasize that the design, the floor plan, and the design elevations that are there were used earlier in discussions and are not the ones that have approved to go forward, correct?
That's correct. This money is to start that design. These are just some concept ideas that were floated mainly, I guess, back during the streetscape discussion.
Right. I just don't want people to see this slide and think that that is the design that we're working on. So, all right. Thank you.
Next up is the Delaware Avenue restroom that City Manager just mentioned. It's not an increase in the cost of it. It's just that it won't be completed by March 31st this fiscal year. So Bert is moving some money from this budget, I guess, however he encumbrances it, into the next fiscal year. But they're not going to be finished by the end of March. So we put money into next year's budget to cover the work that'll take place in April and May prior to the reopening.
Excuse me, does everybody understand that, or do you want an explanation from the finance director?
This is Commissioner Gossett. I understand what's happening there. If I could just back up 1 second, just so the total investment, projected investment over the next 3 years for the Baltimore Avenue restroom is $3.5 million, approximately?
Approximately, that's correct.
Thank you.
I have a question. Can you see me?
Commissioner Gay, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess it is a question for the city manager. Maybe I missed something. I think I understand about the encumbrances, but I also see it on here as 250, but the total is still 6.4 million unless it's not. I mean, what I'm seeing on here is the total stays the same. So does that not get counted in the total, or did you take something else out?
It's
Mr. Dukes will explain that.
Okay.
what we did, we encumbered the prior year fund balance because we didn't use the money in the current fiscal year, so we're carrying it forward. So it's just a funding mechanism. It wouldn't really have an effect on the budget itself.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Okay, moving to the streets department, we'll continue. We talked about the access match, so the amount we're asking for this year would complete our outfitting of all the crossings that we feel require one or could use one, get them completed. It also, as we mentioned a couple weeks ago, it does include getting all of them, or as many of them as we can, out to the edge of the dune or the fencing or the roped area now, so that they're all a little more uniform and they all get to the real hump on the dunes that people have trouble crossing. The hook hoist truck, that's what takes our roll-off containers to and from the tipping station. Also was used effectively this year with snow removal as we were trying to get some of the street ends cleared out with bulk snow. So it would replace one of our 2 operating fleet. The beach rake refurbishment, we do this every year on one of the 2, so it's an every other year expense for us. This thing during the summer obviously runs every day, so it takes a lot of wear and tear. So the refurbishment program, we think, has paid us big dividends over the lifespan of these 2 very important pieces of equipment for us.
This, Mr. Williams, question on that. Just curious, do you have an idea of what a ballpark figure on a purchase of a new beach rake would be?
I do not, Commissioner, but we can certainly get that for you.
Thank you.
Next up is the new wheel loader. This is one of our older pieces of equipment in the fleet. Gets a lot of use all throughout the year, from sand to snow to gravel to dirt, everything. So looking to replace that this year. And a continuation of our annual paving program. I think it's paying big dividends for us as we're rehabbing a bunch of streets throughout the city. Program got a little boost this past year with some extra ARPA money, but we'll go back to our, I think it's $450,000 a year on citywide paving.
A question on that, if I may.
Sure.
Previously, there was a study done for I don't remember the exact determination, but quality of streets or what needs to be done next. Are we still following that plan, or is that plan expired, or what is? I think it was Kershaw Engineering did that for us a number of years back.
You're correct, Commissioner. They did it probably 5 years ago. It's right before I got here, so that's probably 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. We did an update this last year that the board approved. They came in and reassessed all of our streets, so didn't change a lot, but just kind of reprioritized some of them with a new assessment on each of the streets. So we are still following the kind of the master plan. It was just updated last year.
And is that take us out for another 2 years, 5 years, or was it done that way? Or
Typically, they like to look at it every 5, unless something
Right.
significant, happens to alter the condition of a road. But they suggested at that time redoing it every 5.
Great, thank you.
Oh, Kevin, is there a possible end date on this when we say, phew, we've done the entirety of the town and we get a 5-year hiatus?
No.
No? Okay.
The
So it
original,
sounds like it's an annual in perpetuity.
Mayor, the
Commissioner,
original plan,
Legree?
the
Yeah,
original-
you're correct, Mayor. Your memory is correct. As I remember, I think they said you ought to be doing at least 400,000 a year just to stay up and just to keep current. And we've done that, but I remember that being in perpetuity. Thanks.
Thank you.
The other thing that tends to help is when we get funding from other projects to do some of that, like we did this year with ARPA. We also did the streetscape, which came from a separate pot of money. So that helps, but it's going to be a recurring cost for a long, long time. Because the asphalt resurfacing, if it lasts 10 years, that's a pretty good deal. Some you can stretch more they don't get a lot of traffic, but it's just an annual kind of program I think we're going to want to have for quite a while.
So Kevin, could you just put a fine point on this I'm trying to understand with the 450 that I've been seeing for quite some time, would you say that just keeps our heads above water, or would you say we are making some incremental progress every year?
I think the plan tells us that it just keeps us at that basic level of, I forget now what the terminology was for, but it doesn't really get it better. It just keeps it from being worse. So as these get upgraded, then, in 10 years from now, the ones we just did are probably going to need to be done again. But it really just keeps us at whatever that level was that they graded the overall city streets in 5 years ago.
Mayor, may I interject?
I'm trying to see who has their hand up there. I have Commissioner Legree has his hand up. Does anybody else?
Mayor, I just wanted to clarify something for Commissioner Sharp.
Yes, ma'am.
So Commissioner Sharp may remember that we started this off in 2015 with $275,000, and then that number after 2 years was recalculated by our consultant, and we stayed with that $450,000, and that was a projection for 20 years. But obviously, as we go on here, as Mr. Williams stated, then we'll have to look at that and continue to do so. But you realize that while we're doing the citywide paving, we're also looking under the street and seeing what we need to upgrade there with our utilities, water and sewer. So that's why it's tied into that.
Thank you, Sharon. Commissioner Legree, your hand up again?
Yes. I have a feeling that our citizens are going to ask us to look into the cost of pervious paving in the very near future. So it would be nice to get an idea of what kind of funding that's going to take. Thanks, Mayor.
Well, I think if we do that, that's valid, but we also need to be educated on it because there are pros and cons to pervious paving. And so maybe,
Yeah, as I recall, Kircher wasn't high on it, but that was several years ago.
yeah. Anybody else? Go ahead, Kevin. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Continuing with one of our annual programs is the storm sewer assessment and repairs. Obviously, we've I think I showed you the map of what we had done over the past years and how much left to do. I think it's another year, year and a half worth of where we would have every storm sewer videoed, inspected, and then we started to prioritize where those repairs are going. The Wilmington-Baltimore Avenue Streetscape project, we've put in money in this budget for the design of Phase 1. Obviously, we have some questions still out with regard to the undergrounding and phasing and those kind of things. But the money in this current budget year is targeted for our share of whatever we would go to DelDOT for, the 80-20 split for funding from DelDOT. So it all depends, a lot depends on the discussion this afternoon with respect to the undergrounding and are we going to underground and that. So we did put money in it in case the decision is to not underground, then we'll be able to move forward with certainly part of the design for the streetscape program.
Before you get too much further, and I just have a couple questions about, if you can, streets and department there.
Sure.
I noticed that we have, again, advanced the LED retrofit for several years now about lighting along Rehoboth Avenue. Is that something that's just reevaluated every year, or prioritizing it, or just we bumped it a couple years? I'm just curious.
Yeah, Commissioner, I would say that that's just a matter of prioritization. I mean, if it was something that we wanted to do, then we would have to bump something to do it this year. Right now, I think we're showing to try to do a portion of it next year. But again,
Yeah.
it competes with everything else.
And the same is true then of basin number 40, that stormwater design, or what is?
That's correct. That one has a little bit of different angle on it in that we really, because it's such a high dollar item, we really want to get the stormwater utility kind of set up and running, and before we bite off a large project like that under the stormwater piece.
And that would be true of Bayard Avenue also? Is that?
Yes, Commissioner,
Waiting
that's
for
correct.
Stormwater utility?
That's correct.
Okay. So that's about $1 million right there, correct? Or a little more in 24.
For the two.
You're talking for Bayard or for?
Well, combined, the two,
combined,
Bayard
sure.
and number 40 basin,
Right.
so.
Mhm.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Next up is the Beach Patrol. So they have, I believe, 2 Polaris vehicles, which they use to dispatch emergency personnel, EMTs out onto the beach. So they are planning for a replacement this year of one. I don't have the age on that vehicle, but it is gotten to the point where it just needs to be replaced. There's a lot of rust, erosion on the vehicle, and again, it just needs to be replaced. So this is just for one replacement Polaris vehicle.
Thank you, Evan. Commissioner Legree?
On my chart, the next item was boardwalk restoration, and it was to be determined. Are you going to talk about that, Kevin?
Commissioner, I hadn't planned to, but we put kind of a placeholder in there in case we decided
I
we wanted to
I
move
agree. I
forward
just
with a
wondered what we were
large.
doing and how that was there and how we were going forward. But I think that can easily be discussed. Later on down the road. Thanks a lot.
So next up is the parking department. And for the upcoming fiscal year, again, I know it was discussed in the parking department budget meeting, planning to replace a total of 77 Luke Cosmo parking pay stations. On the left is the pay station itself, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, that we've been replacing over the last 3 years. This upcoming summer will be our 4th year of meter replacements, and the map on the right gives you an idea of the locations of those meters. Again, for your information, it would be on Rehoboth Avenue, the City Hall Convention Center parking lot, down near Grenoble Place, and then one down at Deauville Beach to accept credit card payments.
Commissioner Legree?
Oh, I'm sorry, Mayor. I didn't lower my hand.
All right. Go ahead, Commissioner Gossett.
Yeah, just a quick question on that. Will that complete our phase-in of the new Luke Cosmo, or are there still more to be done in future years?
That would complete the replacement, Commissioner. That would also consolidate all of our vendors into one, so we would just have T2 and Park Mobile.
Great, thank you.
Commissioner Gay?
Yeah, thanks. Evan, I noticed it's not for this fiscal year. It's actually been bumped to the next one, the virtual parking permit solution. And we had talked about it last year. So I think it's one that's gotten bumped a couple of years. But I also remember that there were a number of logistical challenges to doing it, which is, I think, more the reason it got bumped than cost. And I guess I'm just wondering, do you still see that as something we're going to be doing in the future? Has there been any progress toward it or what?
Commissioner, there has not really been any progress towards that recently. You're right that there are a lot of logistical challenges that have to be worked out. So I anticipate, working on that over the next, year or two, and possibly getting to that in the future. For now, it's sort of just been deferred to the following year and maybe deferred again until we, get all the logistics worked out. But the benefit of the meter replacements is now we're getting the public accustomed to paying by license plate. And if we were to go towards a virtual permit system, that would also be license plate based, which would require some education. So at least these meter replacements are starting, helping get the public familiar with paying by license plate.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, moving on to the wastewater department. As I mentioned during the public works section, the number one project in my mind is the rehab of the State Road pump station. I think we talked through the how we developed funding for that from the money that Bert was able to save from the previous SRF loan and some payments with that. Flip to the next one, Evan. Obviously, that is something that is, like I said, highest on my priority list of things done. There's some shots of the inside of the pump station, so it's time to put some serious effort into rehabbing that pump station. Next is the one of the large valve replacements down at St. Lawrence Pump Station. This is the valve that keeps the flow from coming back into the plant after it's started its way up towards State Road. We do a recurring types of. This is one we will do in-house, so the majority of that is just the price of the pump and the component pieces that go with that installation, or that valve, I'm sorry, not a pump. Next, we have the continued program of our sanitary sewer system cleaning and videoing. So similar to the storm sewer, I think in 2 more years or so, we'll have every sanitary pipe in the city cleaned and inspected and assessed, which has been very helpful to us already with some of these spot repairs we've had to do that where some of us were wondering how the sewer was still flowing in certain areas with the pipe that had collapsed. But anyway, it's paying us big dividends. We think we have a great assessment now of most of our pipe, and we just want to continue that until we get everything cleaned and videoed in the next couple of years. The logic controllers at one of our pump stations, PS1 and B3, one of the other buildings down at the plant. These are the computers that control the actions of the remote actions at the plant. It signals our guys when something is going wrong. It also sets certain levels that happen automatically, certain things to happen automatically at certain times. So we're doing a periodic replacement of those. You may recall we had a consultant, Keystone Engineering, came in and kind of assessed our whole SCADA and control systems, and we're working through that report they gave us a couple years ago, and this is kind of the next thing in line is the PLCs a couple of the PLCs down at the plant. Our pipe rehab program, we've bumped that up this year. We've got a couple that have been identified from our video inspections that need to be repaired, some significant piping, influent piping down toward the plant. So we've got a little larger number this year, and going forward, now that we've got most of the assessments done, we know where we need to focus our effort at repairs. This is one that we talked about that is a kind of a recurring for us as well. Bill's crew down at the plant tries to do one of the pumps, at least one of the pumps each year. So he puts it in, because of the cost of the pump itself, he puts it in to the CIP so that Bert can track it as a capital expense. But it's something that we do routinely in our maintenance program. And they have a golf cart down that they have been using to get in and around the plant, which has reached the end of its useful life. We're trying to get standardized across, our little small fleet of vehicles. So we're just going to move it, going to get a Polaris to replace it. And it's similar to what we have in many of the other departments, and much safer for them than riding around in a little golf cart. Moving on to the water department, we'll continue our program of water meter replacements. We're probably halfway through. We've got about 3,000, a little over 3,000 of the newer models in place. And we're looking forward to probably the following year being able to transition to a fixed-base system that will read the meters, from a tower and send the information right to Munis, where we can do the billing straight from there, where we don't have to go out and do the readings. But we're about to reach critical mass on that, so this is a continuation of that program, doing several hundred meters, each year.
Kevin, we have $500,000 each year for the next 5 years. Where does the funding come from to achieve that? Are we charging enough to our clients to recover that?
I think we probably are. One thing that we're working right now with the county on is under the infrastructure bill, there's a lot of money in the clean water program. So we're putting in a notice of intent to get additional funding from the state's clean water fund to do a massive amount of these at one time. So we're working that. Back to the basic question, it's built in, I think, to the rate study that was done a year or two ago, with the funding level as it is now at about $500,000 each year.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. I see a hand.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I've been overlooking. Commissioner Legree, Gossett, and Gay. Commissioner Legree?
Gay and Gossett were up ahead of me.
All righty. Commissioner Gossett then.
Just curious on this, the water meter replacements you're speaking about, the new ones going in are available for the remote read, so that the system hopefully installed next year to begin that process of remote reading?
That's correct, Commissioner. And that would give, every resident that has the newer meters the ability to real-time info on their water usage, either here or remotely. So I think that'll be a big plus.
Is that, you've got $500,000 for the next 5 years for water meter replacements? Is that approximation of how many meters are left to go in the system, or are we halfway there? Or?
Correct. So of our almost 6,000 meters, we're at about 3,500 that are of the newer type. So we still have a significant number to go. And if I think they're depending upon if you get pits or just the meter onlys, if they're 2,000, 2,500 a pop to do. So it's still, several years in the making to get up to 100%, unless we can get this money from the state under the Clean Water Program.
And this is all in the past has been done by outside contractors? That's
correct. This is in addition to what we do in-house with our in-house team. They typically are responding to malfunctions or something that happens at a meter. They'll go out and do those repairs and replace it with a new one, but on the scale that we have a contractor each winter come in and do these.
And one other question, just backing up a little bit, remind me how many pump stations we have out there.
Wastewater pump stations?
Yes.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 if you count the main pump or the state road pump station, and 7 if you count the pump station at the plant. So, but remote 6, remote from the plant. Mm-hmm.
And all of those are kind of on an annual or review in the sense of upgrading the equipment or the pumps? I say we got the 30,000 in for a pump, but is that sort of the lifespan of a pump? 10 years, 20 years? Any?
I think Bill would say 15 years, based on some
Okay.
discussions we had yesterday, that a good pump replacement pump will last about 15 years.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Gay?
Yeah, I noticed that comparing this to the very first budget we got earlier, that the total was down by 200,000. It seems to be that the phase 4 design was bumped to the following year. But I have two questions about that. First of all, it was originally in here for 200, but now it's been bumped to the following year at, I think, 800. Is that what I'm seeing? Yeah. And then the big nut, the 6 million for 2 years in a row for the actual upgrade has been bumped yet another year to 25, and then another one in 26. Can you explain that?
Sure. So the initial one that you're referring to that had the 200,000 in the upcoming fiscal year was when we thought we would need to start that this year. When we realized we didn't, because of the timing of when we could start construction, we didn't need to do any of it there. So we just pushed that 200, added it to the old 6, I think, that was in for the design in that second year, and combined it. We just didn't need to start it as soon as we had originally thought. So that's why that looks like a higher number. It's the same number, just now compressed into 1 year. Yeah. And then phase 4 is scheduled to start construction in the fall of 22 this year, the fall of 24 is when we would start phase 4, and we think that's going to be another 2-year project. So hopefully we'll be done phases 1 through 4 by, the summer of 2026.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Legree?
Yes. I got a bunch of questions written down here. When do you think we can start with our fixed base system on our
Our target right now is to put the tower-based system, fixed-base system, in next year's budget. So if we do the work, fall of 2023, then first of the year we'd probably be able to start actually using it as a fixed-base system.
In the fall of 2023, or for 2024, I guess what you're saying.
Fall of 2023 is when, we would probably do the construction installation of the system on the towers.
And then we would start sending the bills out in the beginning of 2024. Is that what I've heard you say?
Correct. Now, I have not spoken to Donna about how long it takes to actually then turn the system into that, but soon thereafter.
The public should know that's going to be a tremendous benefit as far as having to go around, because we can do both sewer and fresh water with that system, and that's a great thing that you're going. I'm really happy that you're doing that. And then perhaps in the beginning of 24, you will have everybody on the system, or will there still be a bunch of folks who are with the existing meters?
Right. It'll still be probably at least a third, maybe a little more, that are still on the old meters, unless we get the big meter project. But for the folks that have the new meters, they'll be able to use it, right away.
Okay. And if we get some money that we don't know about right now, that means that maybe there'll be less than 30%.
That's
remaining
correct.
When we start in the fall of 24, or in the spring, in the beginning of 24, or I'm just trying to get a handle on how far down the road this is going to be. So, what's the progress on the State Road pump station repair? Where are we on that? And is that still is that $2 million still fairly close to what it's probably going to cost?
Yes, we think that's a pretty good estimate. We've spent a lot of time the last couple of months doing that analysis, and we've actually started with the design. It's going to be kind of a progressive design build, because it's got to go back in the same, basically in the same footprint because of everything else that's in the ground over there. So we think the number is pretty good.
Does the repair for the collection system that we're doing nowadays, is that fairly new? I remember when GHD did a wastewater survey back in 2019, and at that point in time, I don't think they made some estimates on what we should be spending every year to keep our collection system in operation and in good repair. Does these new repairs that you're doing significantly lower the amount of work that you'd have to do to keep your collection system under good repair?
If you go back to the pipe repair one. So obviously, Commissioner, every time we do a repair, that's helping our system, right? So
You bet.
And if you go back to that, I think the report you're referring to is the asset management report that they did several years ago. And at that point, they hadn't really done a lot of assessment. They did kind of standard of the industry kind of estimates. Yeah. So when we were building the rate study tables a couple of years ago, we kind of used GHD's industry type estimates for how long pipes typically last, how long they've been in the ground, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
So we built our rehab program similarly to what we did with that rate study. So we put in those numbers, and we're just kind of making progress. And then as we start getting the videos back and we get those assessments done, then it's moved a little bit based upon what we've seen in the field. Not a lot. I mean, their estimates, I think, have been pretty good. Obviously, I just wanted to show you these pipes that certainly we would not have expected to be in the condition they were when we opened them up, but were. So that's the glory of kind of the way the system is now set up to do, where we're doing the assessments. We've got their initial estimates on what to put into the budget. We're finding things as we go and making those repairs. Now, by doing this, all this work that we did with the collection system around State Road Pump Station, that allowed us to then bypass the pump station so we could find out the condition that it was in. Now, sometimes that's not good news to find out, but I would say it's certainly better to find it out, the condition that it's in, and make these, like the $2 million repair to the pump station, rather than allow that thing to fall in on itself. So that's kind of where we're trying to avoid those catastrophic kind of failures. But what we've done with respect to their initial assessment on what was going to be needed over a course of years, built that into the rate study, so we were developing that amount of revenue to come in, and now we're attacking it just as we thought we would according to that plan, and then adjusting based upon what we actually see in the field from the videos.
Okay, yeah, they just measured our collection system and applied a multiplier to that, as I remember.
Correct, and there's different things within the collection system, and they did similar to pump stations, similar to force mains, similar to gravity mains, so they did a really nice job in that. In both of those asset management manuals. Yeah,
and as you say, failure is always more expensive. So I think even though the $2 million is a lot of money, and that's most of the amount that's in our 2023 estimate for wastewater CIP. But it's much better there to do that than it is to.
And it was great that, Bert was able to get that money back from the SRF loan. So it's not found money. I mean, we certainly collected it some time ago, but it would have gone by the wayside if we hadn't been able to recoup that.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Kevin. I have more questions about the O&M and the expenses on and
go to water again
on wastewater, but I can get that later. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Kevin, go ahead.
We started talking about the pipe assessment and rehab. We've started doing water main replacement. So we did some of the assessments early on in the program. Now we're starting to identify which water mains we really want to attack and start replacing. This one helped this year in that we got some ARPA money that you allowed me to use on water main replacement. So we actually did two this year. We did the water main on Olive, and we did the water main on Maryland. And we tied that into our paving program so that, we weren't paving it twice or weren't digging it up twice. So it worked out very well. We feel it worked very well for us, and we're going to try to continue that program as we go into the out years to make sure that we're getting water mains replaced that need to be replaced and streets paved that need to be paved. So it does take us maybe a little bit out of our sequence. We may not actually be doing the road that is in the worst condition in the town because we want to tie it together with a water main. But we're still using both of those, the pavement assessment and our pipe assessments, to then try to link those projects together to get us the most bang for the buck. The other thing that this enabled us to do is we were able to remove probably on the order of 50 to 60 lead goosenecks, which we've touched on very briefly with upcoming rule changes with lead and copper rule, but it's enabled us to get a jump on those as well. So we just want to continue this program pretty much at the current level of funding that we've had, with the exception that last year, we threw an extra 100,000 at it because we got the ARPA money.
Evan, the Olive and Maryland projects, the photograph here is of Olive Avenue. Did they end up increasing the size of some of the water pipes that were replaced?
I think I think, Mayor, that I think both of those were 8-inch already, and we certainly put an 8-inch back in, or put an 8-inch in, and I think they were both 8-inch cast iron, before.
Okay, I just don't remember. I thought some of the pipes went as small as 4 inches.
Well, we definitely have a bunch of 4-inch pipes.
Yeah, see the fire hydrant there has a black bonnet on it, or cap, and that the colors of the bonnets were painted maybe a dozen years ago to identify the flow rate of the hydrant. And so I don't know if we need to double check that those colors are accurate or not. I know that the black bonnets were the lowest flow, and they were sometimes dubbed low flow or no flow. And the fire departments avoid them because they don't give enough capacity. So that may be just something we need to check in if we upgraded any sizes there.
Will do.
Thank you.
Next project are the logic controllers and SCADA systems in the both of the towers. You can see a kind of a picture of the cabinetry that they're there now. But again, it's just moving forward with the work that our consultant advised us to do a couple of years ago in a progressive order to get these, make sure these systems are working properly and will continue to work properly. But I think we had also probably doing Lincoln Street as well, will be the next one, Evan. Right, so similar projects at each of the two major water storage facilities. Well 2R, that's one of our wells out at the Lynch Well complex. It's actually just a we call it a reinstallation. So they go in, they pull the screens, clean the screens, blow it out, make sure it's all serviceable again, or continues to be serviceable, and then the control system as well get replaced with that. One of our larger producers out there. Well 6, as we've talked about, has been giving us problems for the last couple of years. We haven't actually been using it. Well 6 is on the left. It's a small well out in the middle of the Breezewood neighborhood. So I think we've decided that there's not ground there, and it really, because of where it is in the system, doesn't make sense to try to install a new treatment system there. So we're looking for an opportunity to actually construct a new well, and it makes the most sense to go out near well 8, where we already have a treatment system in place, and then it reduces a bunch of the associated piping costs. So this year we're actually trying to ask for money to actually do the investigation at well 8, the site at well 8, to drill a test well and see if we have enough ground, and we certainly have enough water in the water table to have another well there, but to see what it would take to dig another well at well 8, where we have the system and a short connection to get into the overall system, and looking to find a replacement for that well 6 that we, like I say, we haven't been able to use for a couple of years.
Kevin, just a reminder, is that, well 8, is that out by the new BB Medical Building?
Yes, it is, Commissioner. Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
Next up is the IT department, and I believe Max Hamby is conveniently on the line to present his 2 items.
Good morning, Commissioners. As you can see, first we have our normal computer lifecycle replacements. This is basically where we're turning over a third of our desktops every year, as well as other associated equipment that support the end user. And this year we have, we need to replace the batteries in the UPS systems that were installed with the new City Hall. These currently cover the IT server room and also dispatch and, excuse me, and also portions of, other portions of the City Hall. The batteries have just been, we've been doing preventive maintenance on them for the past years, and they're just at a point where several of the batteries are throwing warnings about holding a charge, so it's time to replace.
Any questions for Max?
A question, maybe Max or City Manager Lynn, and I don't know if this is a CIP expense or not, but are we basically up to date with any upgrades or enhancements to the Munis system?
Yeah, Max, you can answer that. We're working on it.
We are scheduled for an upgrade, or we're trying to get an upgrade in place. We're kind of in a crunch time. We're just having an issue with the vendor being able to respond. They have a lot of customers in this same situation. So that will happen this year. So it's not really a CIP issue because we will fund that through, through our maintenance agreements, our existing maintenance agreements. So, but it is a project that we'll be doing this year.
Yeah, I just know that's a crucial piece of equipment for, if you will, for the city. So just to make sure we're up to date on that. And also, have we completed, or are there any other needs? I know in past years, additional boardwalk cameras or video cameras. Is that basically where we need to be also with funding for those areas?
At this point, we are effectively maxed out at our capacity to put cameras on the boardwalk. Currently, we're doing that wirelessly, without spending money on considerable infrastructure. We've kind of hit the limit that we can go there. So now we're talking fiber and electrical upgrades along the boardwalk, and also tying that fiber in from the beach patrol back into our City Hall.
Great. And those are not, or are those CIP expenses or what have you?
We're not sure where they're going to fall. I would assume that they would be, but once again, that's, we're hopefully we will be able to dovetail that in with the Baltimore streetscape.
Okay.
But
great.
That all remains to be seen.
All right. Well, thanks for the update, though.
Next up is the Parks and Recreation Department. There are 2 capital items in there. Liz, I don't know if you are on. If not, I can present these 2 items.
He's not on the call.
So the first is the Lake Jar diffuser system. So this is replacing the diffuser systems that are currently within Lake Jar. I know that she had briefly touched on this in her budget presentation, but the total amount for that is $10,000. The second and last item for the Parks and Recreation Department is a relatively new item. In speaking with Liz, it sounds like she had recently made a visit to Grove Park and had noticed, actually, she was on site, I think, with one of our consulting engineers, Bob Palmer, and noticed that some of the brackets for these pavilions had some spalding and delamination of the metal. Because the metal that was put in place at the time that the pavilions were constructed were not galvanized. So essentially this project would have the contractor lifting the pavilion up off of the concrete, to inspect those brackets and then also install the appropriate galvanized or stainless metal pieces. It is not a hazardous or emergency issue, but is certainly a repair that should be addressed and done correctly with the appropriate pieces. The wood is in great condition, and so is the concrete slab. There might just be some minor upkeep done to that, such as power washing or restaining the wood if the budget allows. Again, this project is not hazardous or an emergency, just something that was noticed and needs to be addressed.
Commissioner Gay?
I have a question about that. I remember Liz telling us about when she was presenting all her budget, she mentioned the Grove Park and how that had come up recently.
Okay.
But in the original CIP, the riding mower replacement was in for this year. Not much, it's like 15,000. But now I see it's not there at all. It hasn't even been bumped to next year. So do you happen to know anything about that? Was that not necessary after all, or what?
Liz actually had funds available in her budget this year, so that piece of equipment was purchased in the current fiscal year.
It was. Oh, okay. So that comes out all together. Okay,
Yes.
Great. Thanks.
Evan, you mentioned the hardware would be replaced with either galvanized or stainless steel. And to me, there's a significant difference there. I always would suggest use of stainless steel, but do you know what the 30,000 encompasses?
I don't know off the top of my head. We essentially just received a rough estimate, again, from our consulting engineer, Bob Palmer, of the 30,000, but I do not know. I think broadly it just encompasses, again, lifting up the pavilion off of the concrete slab, replacing that hardware, and then setting it back in place. And again, if the budget allows, maybe just doing some minor upkeep to the pavilions, staining or power washing. But I don't think we've scoped that just yet in a formal document.
All right, I'm just suggesting to give serious weight to use of stainless steel, even at extra cost.
Sure.
Commissioner Gossett.
Yes, thank you. I just curious, we had looked at last year for a Lake Girard Park master planning, and I see that is not here. Has that been accomplished or just felt that we don't need it anymore, or where are we with that?
I know Liz is working on that with our consultant, and that's been delayed at least. So she's not here to expand more on that, but right now she didn't put that in here.
All right, so that is a consulting company that is reviewing or trying to establish a plan for Lake Girard? Is that?
Yeah, I mean, working with Envirotech and dealing with that is a big and expensive issue right now. So it's not that it's forgotten, but it's been taken off right now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We have on there one of the lines near the bottom, Sussex County grant expenditure, $30,000 for this year. Could you explain that for everybody, please?
I'll defer to Bert on that question.
Every year, Sussex County gives us $30,000. Well, they've been increasing it recently, and we've been classifying that $30,000 as a capital item because I think originally they were maybe using it for a police car. In actual practice, that $30,000 is probably split up and spent for a lot of operating type items. The only justification to keep it in there is it gives you a little transparency. But I have thought for a while that maybe I ought to take that out of the capital and just put it in as an operating line item. And, you know, that's, there's a case to be made for that. But just for consistency, I've been including it in the capital. But I can't guarantee you that it'll be spent for a capital item. It may be, may not.
All right, thank you. Any other questions from the commissioners for anybody on any topic? Commissioner Legree?
I'm glad to hear that Bert's here. On capital contributions for wastewater fund, there is a $956,100 capital contribution. It's line item. This is the daggone small, so it's line item 498000, Bert.
Right. What that's about is the debt that we have for the outfall and for the plant loan. There were two loans that were made. First of all, you had the 40 million plus, and then the 12 million for the plant, which we're still drawing down. Well, the debt service on that is shared with the county, 42%, with the county paying 42%. We can't really take the debt on the balance sheet and say, well, 42% of that is the county's, because it's not. The entire debt is our obligation. So when we receive a bill from the for the annual well, it's going to be quarterly now. I'm sorry, it's semi-annual debt payment. We take 42% of that and bill it directly to the county. So it really is a source of revenue that comes in, and it wouldn't be appropriate to put it as a reduction of an expense line item, because truly the expenses are expense. So basically the proper accounting for that is to show it as a capital contribution, basically a revenue source.
I hear you. I had no idea. So that number on debt service is actually the number on debt service. And the number on capital contributions is what we get from Sussex, from, I guess, Dewey, Henlopen, and North Shores.
That's correct. I mean,
42%.
The accounting world always has to use their own term, and they call it a capital contribution, which it really is. But really, I mean, the truth of it is, it's a debt sharing source of revenue. But so you're right.
Okay, and that number on debt service is this. This avoids another question that I had. And that number on debt service is really what the debt service is.
That's 42% of what, when we get a bill, we book 42% of that as a revenue, because we're actually sending a bill to the county for that. So it's running through our system as just a bill to, like any other ordinary customer. So it automatically hits the capital contribution.
And I'm sure you've told me already, and I've forgot, but the 1.6 million for reserve is left over from unspent from last. Explain that to me.
Well, what happened when we did the outfall, the amount of money that was available was over $40 million. But when we really completed the construction for the outfall, we came up less than that. So we were happy on that. However, we would like to take advantage of all the funding that was available. So we could have told DNREC, okay, stop it at the 38 million point or approximate 38 million point and just start amortizing it there. Well, since 2010, we've been out of pocket paying for the engineering costs, and there were some consulting bills. And we had a lot of good detail on that. So when we had our discussions with DNREC, they said, well, you don't have enough expense, so we're going to just start amortizing at a lower amount. And I said, well, I've got all these out-of-pocket costs, if I can document them and send them to you. So it was quite a project. I pulled every invoice and submitted them to one of their engineers who was responsible for this. And they sent us a check for $1.6 million. It was really 1.5999 or something, but we parked that money into a CD. I wanted to segregate it. I don't have any doubt about where the money was. So the money's earned a little interest, not much, but it's earned a little bit of interest. So Kevin's got his hand out now, and he wants to use it, and he's certainly entitled to use it, because that's what the money was intended for.
It's better in our pocket than in their pocket. And so this is a one-time thing, the 1.6, but the 1 million for capital contributions is gonna keep on coming.
As long as the loan's there.
Thank you, sir. That's the end of my question.
Thank you. Commissioner Gossett?
Yeah, just City Manager Lynn, if you could refresh my memory, was there a discussion earlier in budget talks about refurbishing the lighthouse at the traffic circle, or is that in process? Or for some reason, I have a note here about lighthouse. And was that at some point, I know we were looking at restoration or painting at least or something. Is that not in the CIP, I guess, or is that still a project?
Commissioner, I'll answer that. We have money in our operations budget in the engineering line, and I think we talked about this a couple weeks ago as well, to do a structural assessment of the lighthouse this year.
Okay.
We do the painting is in our maintenance budget already, but we did have a separate line in our engineering budget for structural assessment.
Okay, that's what I remember. Thank you.
Commissioner Gay?
Yeah, I guess the first question I'm going to ask, because I don't want to get ahead of things, is where do we go from here? I know today's discussion was primary capital, but what's next? Because I have some comments that aren't about capital. Well, they can be, but they're not. They don't start that way. Okay.
Well, we've got, if we look forward, we've got scheduled tentative budget meetings for March 7th in the afternoon.
Okay.
We have another tentative budget meeting for 9 a.m. on March 18th. However, we need to be mindful that at our regular meeting on March 18th is when we vote to adopt the budget, so that we're on our timeline. So I guess the one way to answer it is that if everybody can answer their questions today, then we don't need the additional meetings. And if not, then we need to make a determination before the end of the day. Do we go ahead and schedule the March 7th meeting to fill in all the blanks?
Okay. So then you'll take general questions now.
Aaron, are you comfortable taking general questions now versus pushing them off to March 7th?
Mayor, I would agree that we can take general questions now. We typically have scheduled 6 meetings, not every year, especially in my tenure have we used them. So, if the commissioners do have questions, certainly we'll be able to answer them.
I would say it's only 10 o'clock. Let's see what we can accomplish in the next hour-ish. And if we can get everybody's questions answered, then that would give us the opportunity to not have the budget meeting number 5 on March 7th.
Okay.
But it is tentatively scheduled, so we can certainly do that. So Commissioner Gay, why don't you go ahead and start off?
Yeah, okay, and actually the second half of my question here does relate to the CIP, but the first thing was, we made a big decision last week on the parking season, and that has a budget implication in both ways, revenue as well as the cost of the staff and extending it. And I noticed, at least I think, you can correct my math if I'm wrong, but I believe I picked up in the changed numbers in the latest budget that we got dated February 16th that the parking revenue estimate has gone up $300,000. Part of it on the meter line, part of it on the credit card line, and part of it on the pay by phone line. And interestingly, the parking expense in one category, meters, seems to have gone down by $95,000, but the permits went up $10,000, which I assume is the staff necessary to continue issuing permits for those additional days of the season. So that's great. So I'm assuming that 300,000 is basically the estimate of the 9-day, however many days it is, of the extended season. And I guess I was hoping that some of that revenue could be used for bringing back a capital expense, maybe from the following year. And I know Commissioner Gossett brought up earlier today about the LED lights, and that's something that has been bumped a couple of years and is a couple of $100,000, would kind of tie in nicely with that parking revenue. Either that or earmarking it for the streetscape or something, where it would be appropriate to put that money toward. But what I see instead is that the administrative expenses went up by $300,000. and including a contingency that went up 250. So I guess I'm just wondering, where are we with the parking revenue, and do we not have the ability to use it on our costs, or why did the administrative expenses go up by the same amount?
Well, I can certainly speak to that, and so can the finance director. But on every iteration, when we meet with the commissioners, we go back to the drawing board, if you will, and we make adjustments on a regular basis. So some of those adjustments that you're seeing are based on conservative projections that we make and have made in the past, and we alter those estimates to balance the budget. So, for instance, this last iteration, after the third round, we had approximately $120,000 deficit of what we needed to balance the budget. So then we changed those numbers to bring you a balanced budget. And it's, as I said in the first budget meeting, we're continually making changes until the commissioners adopt the final budget. Tweaking numbers is basically what we have to do on an ongoing basis, because behind the scenes, we're working on pay scales, we're working on providing performance reviews for all employees. And this is the time of the year when we certainly do that, to adjust the budget and come up with and meet with the employees, and every supervisor does that with their staff. The big piece here, obviously, as far as reviews and budget adjustments that you don't see, is the police negotiations that, are still taking place. So they're still ongoing. We have an adjustment that we make that you noted, Commissioner Gay, an increase in the contingency, and we plan to use that for not the entire amount, but certainly we plan to use that if we are able to negotiate a contract before March 31.
Okay.
And Sharon, if I could just add 2 points as well, hopefully that answer some of Commissioner Gay's questions. So the changes in the parking credit card revenue and pay by phone revenue were actually changes that were made back on February 7th. So we have not adjusted any of the parking revenue based off the change of the season or the change in the rate. We decided to be a little bit more conservative and just keep it flat. So that could be, I guess, something that we look at. And to address the question about the parking expenditures and why those had come down, we had received some updated numbers or estimates from Vicki Hatton in the accounting department on the park mobile fees, the pay by phone processing fees, and the parking credit card fees. So based on her estimates, those numbers did come down a little bit. So that's why you see a reduction in those expenses.
Okay. And did the permit go up because of staff? Am I right about that? That it went up to 10,000 for the increased staff? That's all it's going to cost us? Or are those not in there at all? Increased costs?
I think that's just an adjustment that we
Okay. All right.
made there based on what I previously stated.
Then the second half of my question is still partly related to parking, partly not. And that is, if an increase in revenue is not here for the increased season, then it seems like to me we're leaving money on the table, because we're obviously going to get some revenue. Maybe we don't know how much, but I thought we'd been looking for an estimate of what we might get for that period of time. Yeah. But also, we're supposed to get $500,000 from the county as the excess from their transfer tax. And I didn't know if by the time of our budget, I think I'd asked at the last meeting, would we know if we're getting that or when we're getting that by the end of our budget process? And I think, City Manager, you said yes, you hoped we would. So again, I wonder what are we going to do with it, and what can now that the budget is balanced, and now that we have this 6.4 million in capital expense, which has not changed. So as other costs have grown in the budget and switched around, the capitals have remained the same. And it's a big increase over the previous years, and which is great, because now we have the lodging tax to cover that, and we have increased transfer taxes to cover that. And it's great to see the capital go up with some of that revenue coming in. But it's going to take an even bigger jump next year to something like 16 million. And even though 7 million of that is related to streetscape and other projects, it's still a lot. It's still going to go up just in all the departments to the largest it's ever been. And I guess I just wonder, what can we do with the 500 from the county and some amount of parking revenue that so far we have not allotted?
So the parking revenue is, we have 9 days, 9 days additional. It's difficult to estimate that. I mean, we've gone round and round. We can take a daily rate in the first couple of weeks in June. We know Memorial Day weekend is pretty consistent and high usage, and then it goes down until the school lets out, and then it increases again. So we can do that. And as far as any additional, monies that we do receive, it's typical that we don't earmark those funds for, certain projects, especially for funds that aren't received yet. If we do, and we hope to receive them next fiscal year, that money just goes into the general fund, and at the end of the fiscal year, it ties out into our fund balance. So if it's not earmarked, then certainly, because we don't want to earmark it for, let's say, LED lighting on Rehoboth Avenue, because we can't plan exactly that we will get that. So you don't see those LED lights because it has been pushed off. You can certainly bring it back in and we can increase the CIP, but we didn't plan to do that for this year. So I'd say that any additional funds, it's good to have that, and it's good to have additional revenue. But we've been in the practice of budgeting very conservatively. And I think from a financial standpoint, Mr. Dukes will agree to that. That's the way to go. We're seeing, times right now where we're, unforeseen times, but times that, especially financially, we've been able to increase our fund balance, and we've been able to recover based on the additional hotel tax and, of course, the real increase in the returns for real estate transfer tax. We're seeing the same thing last year. I mean, Mr. Dukes thought we wouldn't, but we are, and that trend is probably going to continue next year. So it's unheard of, but we also, on the other side of that, need to be very conservative and have funds for a rainy day, which I'm very happy, to be able to tell you that we're in good shape that way.
Yeah, and I know we've always budgeted conservatively, and I think that's great. I mean, part of the reason I bring it up is just the huge increase that we are due to experience, next year and the year after. And I'm just looking for ways to prepare for that, because it seems to me that the money that's in there for the streetscape is not even the whole money. It would be whatever we'd have to match a grant for. So we know we're going to need grant funds, but what's in there would be our portion. And at some point we may want to rethink the earmarking. I'm not now, not today, but I'm just looking ahead. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Chernowsky, and then Commissioner LeGree. Commissioner Chernowsky, go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor. And I'll just I'll add to Commissioner Gay's comment. I think that we are being fairly conservative, and we should plan to add some of these additional capital improvements. I think similarly, was it last year or the year before, mid-year, we kind of sat down and had a budget recap and I got an update on where it looked like we would fall. And maybe that's something we want to do again this year and reevaluate at that time, adding some of the capital improvements or bumping them up a year so that they can be done next fall, perhaps. But, you know, there's a few numbers we don't know yet. The rental tax is just coming in now. I think we're going to see that is going to be much higher than budgeted. And I think the same will be true for this upcoming budget year. So I think there's things that we don't know yet that we will, you know, in a few months, and we can reevaluate things. But I've got some specific questions to the budget. So if you could bear with me. Sharon or Bert, on page number 4, which is the general fund revenue, it looks like the building permits and appeals number changed to 870,000 and change. Is there,
which line number, Ed?
401,150.
Building permits and appeal, okay.
Well, you can see the year-to-date actual is over 1.1 million. It's going to be hard. I can't predict, and I don't think any of us can, what it will be next year, because it's dependent upon volume of construction activity. But the 870,000, again, is consistent as far as being conservative. I don't know what, it's easy to bump these numbers up. The problem you run into is if you start taking uncertain streams of revenue, and 70% of our revenue is uncertain because it's user fee related, and you bump that revenue up, and then you spend the money, and if the revenue doesn't come in, you have a challenge. So I think a city like Rehoboth, where property taxes only represent about 15% of our general revenue source, you have to be conservative. We had a year back in 2008 when the transfer tax went from $2 million to about 900,000, and everybody was pointing fingers. I had just arrived on the scene, and of course, when everything goes bad, it's the bookkeeper who made the mistake. But the truth of it is, these are volatile sources of revenue, and you have the power to recommend increases, but you know, our practice has been conservative, and I think that 870,000, it may be, we could bump it up to 900, but none of us know really what it's going to be.
Commissioners, you might.
Sharon has her hand up. If you don't mind, we'll get back to you, Commissioner Chernowski. Sharon, go ahead.
I think Bert wanted to say something in the last segment, but maybe you did that.
Well, I'll make. You're talking about assigning revenue, and that's a thing that you can easily do. The accounting world has 4 or 5 designations in the fund balance. What we're really showing our fund balance is our unrestricted fund balance. Well, if the commissioners wanted to really restrict something, they could do that, and what you would see in your fund balance, you'd see a line item for the restriction for whatever specific project you really wanted to have done. There's also other levels of fund balance which are less restrictive. It could be, you can give it a category of assigned, I believe, and a city manager could, if things didn't go as well for the year, it could be reduced or changed. So certainly, if you want to go ahead and restrict money, there are various levels of restrictions, and it would appear in your fund balance, and so that would be the way we would do it on the mechanical side. But if you really had something that you really wanted to restrict, you can put a hard restriction on there so that it absolutely has to be done, or you can put one that's less restrictive.
Thank you. Ed, you want to continue?
Yeah, Bert, and I appreciate that, and I understand. My question more was that number is redlined, so I was specifically asking what changed, and why it changed.
Well, why is it 870,000?
Yeah, it looks like it's redlined, so that number changed from the last
That's
version
right.
of the
And,
budget.
go ahead.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add is it's highlighted in red, but that also encompasses changes that have happened from previous budget meetings. So that change was also included in the February 7th meeting.
Okay.
Typically, when we, have a deficit in the budget, in order to balance it, we adjust revenue accordingly. And that was
Okay.
one of the accounts that we had adjusted.
Commissioner,
Okay,
one
so
of the-
it was a minor change, nothing significant.
Yeah, well, these are
I just
cumulative.
didn't,
These
I
are,
didn't notice it in the last version.
these are cumulative changes, and because this is a working document, you see some red highlights, and even there are a few yellow highlights in there. And I just felt, I would leave them in there. This is not a finished document. I just wanted us to be able to look at that and say, well, what happened there? And that, obviously triggered your question. So I'll continue that practice. I think I think it's maybe not as pretty, but it's as a working document. I think
Well,
it's an easy thing to do.
And that's the best way, commissioners, we can be transparent and show you what I was referring to earlier, and that it is a work in progress. We start this, back every year. We start this in early November, and we continue through that until March 31st. So, or I'll say when the commissioners adopt the budget at your regular meeting in March. So there aren't, it's, as you know, not just one size fits all at the beginning when you see this in January. So we need to continue with that.
No, agreed, and thank you, Sharon. It is very helpful to see the changes. The process is very well done, and kudos to you and your staff. My last question on this is also related to a change, beach concessions, 408,300. And it looks like that number changed, but that's a fixed contracted amount. So I was just curious about.
Well, you're exactly right. The reason it changed, I changed it to the amount of the contract that's
Okay.
there for the coming fiscal year.
All right, excellent. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Legree?
Yeah, a couple of things. This is the first time in my memory, and my memory does go back, well, maybe not anymore, but anyway, this is the first time I can remember us going over 30 million for in our general fund, total operating and all the funds together. I think that's something, but maybe just to me. But is Kevin still on? Do we know what we're going to come out on the costs of phase 2 of the upgrades? I'm sorry, wastewater upgrades.
Of all the upgrades, Commissioner, or just phase 2? We're right targeting at
Everything, but
12 million.
not phase 2 yet. And I'm just wondering if we even know yet.
Could you say that again, Commissioner? I got stepped on a minute.
How are we going to come out on phase 2 cost? Do you know yet?
Yes, Commissioner, we have because we're almost complete with our piece of it. So we're going to be just under that 12 million. So we had
okay, and
estimated at 12. We're going to be at 11.7 or 11.8 probably.
Okay, 11 and change. What we have extended the bid timeline for 3B, for phase 3B. Was there a reason? Do we have any idea what phase 3B? Are you getting any kind of hints on that or anything?
As far as costs, not yet. We have our our consultant estimate, which we feel is pretty tight. We had a very good turnout at the pre-bid, so we have a lot of plan holders. So we expect to get several bids for the project. We delayed it a week just because after the pre-bid, there were a lot of questions that some of the contractors were asking, and by the time we could get them answers back, we wanted to give them adequate time to put their bid together.
Okay, that's great. That means that they're going to be competitive.
We certainly think so.
Okay. And I just want to say during the COVID tighten down, city manager did extremely well in cutting the expenses and preparing us to meet the oncoming tough times. And I just think it works great to have the conservative outlook that we have now. And I know it's in Bert's DNA, so I think we're doing great. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the commissioners?
Yeah, just two quick ones, if I may. The projected FY22 projections, those are as of what date, Bert? Is that February or January?
I updated those for this meeting, Commissioner, and I made those projections I first revised the year-to-date actual column and then made my projection after I saw what the year-to-date actual was. So they're current because those year-to-date actuals I pulled from whatever we had to that particular day, yesterday or Monday.
So that's specific to the date, not end of the month close. Okay, thank you.
No, it's not. It wouldn't. Those numbers would not tie into your end because they were pulled as of, say, the 16th, 17th of the month.
Okay. And this is more of a general question, I guess, but the county is in the process of doing reassessments. And have we had any conversations or discussions about how that they might impact us, or is that an opportunity for us to take a look at our reassessment process, or is that?
Yeah, Commissioner Gossett, you and I had briefly discussed this several months ago, and I did mention to the county administrator that, we need to sit down, but they're not yet complete their process. He knows that, we're interested in discussing any possible impact to the city. So that hasn't taken effect yet.
Okay, thank you very much.
Anybody else? Any further notes or comments from the staff, Sharon?
No, Mayor and Commissioners, there are none. Again, it's up to you how you want to go proceed with this, whether or not to have additional meetings or we touched upon, as long as we've touched upon everything, that's up to you.
Well, I would need to notice a budget meeting by the February 28th, on or before. Hearing no further questions, I'm going to make the assumption that everybody's satisfied with what we have, unless I hear from you otherwise. And so unless I do hear from you otherwise, then I am intending to not schedule budget meeting and notice it for March 7th. Any comments, Commissioner Gossett?
Yeah, exactly. I'm just curious, City Manager Lynn, any thoughts on on the police department negotiations on the contract? I know typically in past, whatever that increase is, that is adjusted back to the city staff. So is there a target date for that completion? Would that be by end of March that would incorporate specifically into the budget, or any thoughts of how that would be administered?
So again, as I said, the police negotiations are ongoing. Our next meeting is the first week of March. We've already included an increase for staff in this budget, so we're just planning on using the hopefully a settlement amount from the contingency, as I mentioned earlier.
Okay. All right, thank you.
So are we comfortable skipping future budget meetings and going right to the vote to adopt the budget at our regular meeting on March 18th? I'm getting a couple nods of heads. I'm going to assume that that is true. Again, today is what, the 18th? I would need to post the meeting by the 28th. So I would need to know by the middle of next week if indeed somebody has a lot of questions that can't be resolved by just one-on-one conversation with the city manager. So again, we're going to make the assumption that we're not going to schedule that meeting and go forward. If there's no further questions, I'm getting ready to adjourn. Anybody else? Sharon, thank you and your staff. You've done a tremendous amount of work on this, and it shows in the amount of organization you presented to us. With that, I'm going to adjourn the meeting at 10:30 this morning.